Good evening, everybody. Thank you for coming. Sorry we're late coming out of closed session. Welcome to the Lake Bluff School District 65 Board of Education special meeting for May 12, 2015. To begin with, Leanne, can you please take a roll call vote?
Sure. Mark Berry.
Present.
Leanne Charlot, present. Julie Gottschall.
Present.
Richard Haig, absent. John Marzin.
Present.
Susan Ryder.
Present.
All right, we're good. We've got a quorum. We can begin. And just so everybody knows, the reason we have we're calling this a special meeting tonight is because it is the opportunity to appoint a new board member. So it's a little different than our typical committee of the whole, where we don't vote on anything, and we're going to vote on a couple of things. One of which is our new board member. We're going to go right to the Pledge of Allegiance. So if you guys can all stand and join me. Pledge allegiance to
the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. First thing we start off with every week is the opportunity for public comment. If anybody in the audience would like to address the board, please do so now. If not, we're going to keep moving along and go right on to our appointment of our new board member, Mr. Phil Hood. And before we go there, I'm going to give you a little bit of background, just for the record. On April 8th, board member Letchinger resigned from the board for personal reasons. On April 14th, we had an open meeting where we announced the community that this board position would become available. The next day, we posted an application on our website, giving the community 2 weeks to apply for the board position. April 20th, I met with the Lake Bluff School Caucus to discuss and share what was going on. April 29th was the due date for applications to the board. And then on April 30th, the entire board met to screen applications. We then screened applications, and the caucus on May 4th interviewed 2 of those candidates, 2 out of 3 candidates, and made a recommendation to the board. On May 7th, the board then interviewed 3 candidates and made this decision, and tonight we'll vote and swear in the new candidate. So, knowing the background, we turned that around pretty quickly. I want to offer a very heartfelt thank you to the entire community for stepping forward and helping us through this process. We got 8 fantastic applications, which was a wonderful asset to the schools. It made our job as a board quite challenging to narrow that down and finally select a fantastic candidate. But the upside is also that we now have a list of prospective volunteers and committee members who we can call on to help the board, and also potential candidates to run for election at the election in 2 years. So I think it was a great effort on the part of the community, and thank you for stepping up, and also on the board for going through all this wonderful list of people and coming down to our new candidate. And before we go for a motion to appoint a new candidate, I just want to give a little background. Our new candidate that we're going to propose to the community and to the board is Phil Hood. Phil has been in the community for about 2 years. He moved here for a position at Lake Forest College. He's the Vice President of Development and Alumni Relations. His wife and Phil have 2 young children who are 6 and 10, did you say? 6 and 10, all in school within the district. Phil attended Luther College and Indiana University. He currently sits on the Lake Forest Lake Bluff Chamber of Commerce. He has prior professional experience at Illinois College in Jacksonville, Illinois, at the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota, at the University of Illinois Foundation in Urbana, and at Gustavus Adolphus College in St. Peters, Minnesota. So I want to welcome Phil and thank you for going through this whole process. And let's move on to the part where we actually make you a board member. Let's see, so we do the appointment, the motion first before we swear him in, right? Okay, so item 5A is, may I have a motion to appoint Phil Hood to fill the vacancy of Christine Letchinger, whose term expires April 2017.
So moved.
Second. Okay, we have a roll call vote, please.
Leanne Charlot, yes. Julie Gottschall.
Yes.
Richard Haig, no. Absent, excuse me. John Marzin.
Yes.
Susan Ryder.
Yes.
Mark Berry.
Yes. Okay, so we have the motion is approved. And now what we need to do is ask Phil to take the oath of office, which I've given to him, and he's just going to read it in his most earnest and truthful voice.
All right. I, Philip Richard Hood, do solemnly swear that I will faithfully discharge the duties of the office of member of the Board of Education of Lake Bluff School District 65 in accordance with the Constitution of the United States, the Constitution of the State of Illinois, and the laws of the State of Illinois to the best of my ability. I further swear that I shall respect taxpayer interests by serving as a faithful protector of the school district's assets. I shall encourage and respect the free expression of opinion by my fellow board members and others who seek a hearing before the board while respecting the privacy of students and employees. I shall recognize that a board member has no legal authority as an individual and that decisions can be made only by a majority vote at a public board meeting. And I shall abide by majority decisions of the board while retaining the right to seek changes in such decisions through ethical and constructive channels.
Please join me in welcoming Phil Hood. Thanks, Phil. It's official.
Thanks.
All right. Back to business. Item 7, addition of a discussion item. If anybody on the board would like to suggest items for future board agendas, please do so now. I have one that I want to, two I'd like to suggest. One is a conversation I had with Dr. Sophie earlier today that will become more apparent later on, but there's some, not controversy, there's some lack of clarity in the board policy on curriculum, on adopting new curriculum. And I would suggest that either tonight or in the future we address that issue. Wasn't clear. Also, if Dr. Sophie could tell the board what she can, and for the community as well, about the incident at the middle school.
Yes. As most of you know, over the weekend, and we have it narrowed down between Saturday morning and Monday morning, we had a break-in at the middle school. During the break-in, we had 52 to 53 laptops, and that story changes with each report I read. So it's between 52 and 53 laptops stolen from the building, as well as some glass in the doors were broken that needed to be replaced. It's very important that I don't share too many details because it is an ongoing police investigation. I was told by our police chief to just let everybody know that this is a top priority for them. They're working with other police throughout throughout Illinois, but the actual registry for the computers is a national registry. So if anybody tries to sell them in any other place, and for some of the computers, even if they use them, that will send off notification. But it was very disheartening. Our staff really stepped up, and because we had to route kids into different parts of the building, because it wasn't found until I got a call from Nate around 7 in the morning. So we are doing what every other district has done when something like this is happening. We're reviewing everything regarding security in the building. So,
did any of the computers have the locate me function on them?
Actually, yes, Jen, 3 of them had that. And that's been handled. They all also had serial numbers. So it's just very disheartening to walk in a building and we had a staff member find it. And I think it was just disturbing because it's Lake Bluff.
It's a violation.
Everybody really honors our schools. So I feel very confident that Lake Bluff Police were there very quickly and spent the majority of the morning. Lake Forest Police also sent some representatives over, and I feel confident that the perpetrators will be caught.
And at some point we'll have a further discussion regarding our security systems at the school.
The majority of our discussions with security are really handled in closed session because of the nature of security in our buildings in general. So our parents just need to know that we really feel that security in our buildings is of utmost importance, and we will continue to always evaluate and improve. So that's a good question.
Yeah, this isn't really a discussion item, but just to let the board know that we received very nice thank you notes. One from Maggie Kanakis, our nurse at the elementary school, letting us know how much she appreciated flowers that we gave to her for Nurses Day. And another from Alice Wagner, who's the secretary at the elementary school, for flowers that we sent to her.
Great. Okay, thanks. So we're going to move on to item 8, which is a presentation by Kelly Bay, our curriculum coordinator. And Kelly will provide the yearly update on our curriculum cycle that will directly impact further discussions in this meeting on science curriculum adoption, as well as the language arts, writing curriculum, and writing curriculum adoption.
If I could make one suggestion too, Kelly is going to be presenting on our curriculum cycle update. And in items C and D, she is presenting information on curriculum adoptions. And we do have teachers that are here this evening that came for those presentations. So if there's any way we can move those items up so that they can go home and prepare for tomorrow,
Why not?
it would just mean as soon as Kelly's done with curriculum, we'd move right into the science adoption.
Sure.
Great, thank you. Good evening, everyone. I am here to give you a brief update on curriculum, our cycle. Really want to focus on the work that's been done this year and then give you some ideas about where we're going moving forward. So I want to first acknowledge that our hardworking staff has been really busy this year in terms of planning. We've been doing a lot to implement and then also spending some time, especially now in the spring, to reflect. So a quick just kind of look behind us. I want to acknowledge the presentation that you heard last year from Joanne Trahanis. So she talked about the formation of some committees. She also mentioned that we're well on our way to build curriculum surrounding the new state standards, and our focuses were in the 3 areas that you can see up there: math, English language arts, which is also referred to as ELA, and then world language. So kind of a quick look behind us. And then moving forward, I wanted to just acknowledge that we do have some very important decisions to be made. Just as our teachers are moving forward with building curriculum, working as teams, there's a lot out there now as publishers and different initiatives are coming about that we'll have to make some decisions about which way do we want to go. But I think that the future is bright, and I want to acknowledge that first and foremost. So some of the things that you can expect to hear about as we move forward is the work that we've done with our world language department. So we had a consultant come in several years back, Helena Curtin, who is a nationally known figure in the area of world language curriculum development, and she has done some really incredible work with our world language teachers to enhance the instruction in their classroom. So we actually had a meeting this morning with Helena, and we're celebrating a lot of the work that's been done. These teachers have some perspective in which they're able to see the big picture of foreign language and proficiency in that area. So this year, one of the new things that our world language teachers took some risk in is implementing a new professional development model for the district. We've tried what's called a studio model. So for kind of the first time, our elementary school teachers had the opportunity. We went over to the middle school, so they were able to observe foreign language instruction in the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade French and Spanish classrooms. And so observing there enhanced really everyone's sort of perception. So as we talk about what this big picture looks like in terms of foreign language, they were able to see how initial instruction that they had created, kindergarten through 5th grade, develops into that language acquisition for our 6th, 7th, and 8th graders. So after the opportunity to observe in the middle school, our middle school staff was able to come over to the elementary building and observe in kindergarten 1st, 3rd, and 5th grade Spanish classes. So really expanding their practices as instructors of the foreign languages. The opportunity to give feedback and celebrate that instruction was really powerful for everyone involved. I want to point out one of the assessments that we use in our district to measure student proficiency in the foreign language is the STAMP assessment, which is the standards-based measure of proficiency, and this is given to 5th through 8th graders. So just a little sort of treat that we were able to celebrate this morning is our 8th graders in Spanish in the year 2013, 41% of 8th graders scored, they met the target of intermediate is what the descriptor is called, so 41% in the year 2013. Now in 2015, 57% of our 8th graders are meeting this target. So I think this is a really important for us to acknowledge, and it speaks directly to the instruction that's happening in those classrooms. We also had some randomly sampled French 7th graders that took the STAMP assessment last year, now taking it as 8th graders. Each of those 10 students made some significant growth, anywhere from 2 to 4 points, which is pretty amazing when you consider sort of the high is 10, so our students are scoring sort of in the 6 range, which is really impressive for French, for any foreign language. So we're going to continue our work with Helena. Our teachers are well on their way, our world language teachers are well on their way to supporting one another, and so her presence in the district may decrease, it will decrease a bit, but she's really built a path for us that is going to steadily move us forward. In the area of math, a lot of time has been spent on math, and I think it really shows in the results in terms of our test scores and data. So this year, our elementary teachers continue to develop instructional practices by bringing in an updated program, Bridges for Mathematics. So they spent a lot of time working in their teams to really plan for instruction, to read through lessons, to implement, to talk over assessment and lessons. We also had Janice Heigl, a consultant who's been working with us for some time now. This is, I think, her 6th year in the district. She was able to join us for multiple sessions with staff. And in the past, they would spend time looking through lessons. She'd give some very supportive suggestions about how we can really target students within our classroom and make decisions about each of the lessons. We also attempted the studio model with math this year. So teachers from 4th grade, at the same time, we all went into a 4th grade classroom and observed that teacher teach math. So we were able to then come back after that math lesson, give that teacher some praise and feedback, and really articulate about how what we saw in her classroom or his classroom can be brought into all of the 4th grade classrooms, or we can give some very constructive feedback about what we might have done a little bit differently. So a real powerful model for our teachers to be able to visit one another's classrooms during instruction to improve their implementation of not only this math program, but our alignment to Common Core math standards. This work will continue. We definitely want to continue the studio model so that we can have additional observation. And with Janice's work, we have just had some, again, significant results in the area of math. And so we don't want to back down from that. We want to continue to see that student growth. English language arts, I mentioned when I presented in the fall, that idea of writing is really a priority for us. So while the reading is absolutely something that we're targeting, writing has been a huge area of focus across the district. So there's been some emphasis at the middle school on writing across the curriculum, so it's not just the language art classrooms in which students are needing to develop arguments and support claims with evidence, but it's happening in our social studies and our science classrooms. These teams, at our language arts teams at the elementary school and at the middle school, have also had time this year, and again, the emphasis has really been on writing, and I think in my next writing proposal you'll hear a little bit more about what they've been working on and why it's so important. I want to note that the integration is really key to maximize the amount of time within that we have these students in our classrooms. We need to integrate. We also need to integrate because it's really what makes sense for kids. If we are teaching a concept in social studies, we can embed reading strategy instruction there, or give them skills to write like a historian or write like a scientist. So teachers are working to sort of hone their skills on that, what's called disciplinary literacy, and that's been it's been really powerful, and there's been a lot of aha moments this year to see just how that clicks for kids and teachers. We do have some plans to partner moving forward with Lake Forest in our work to provide professional development to our staff. So you'll hear more about that as we engage in those practices with our neighboring district. I want to mention science is going to be a major area of focus for us next year. We've spent some time over the last couple of years learning a little bit more, learning a lot about the next generation science standards. So a new set of standards that has been adopted by the state. We're looking at full implementation of these standards in alignment by the year 2016-17, so in 2 years for the school year. Our 6-8 teachers have done a lot at the middle school in the science department to build scope and sequence, and they're already implementing some minor shifts in their instruction this year. And you'll hear a little bit more about where science is headed in the next presentation. At the elementary school, our K-5 teachers are going to do, the goal for next year is really to bring in one new unit that's going to be fully aligned with these new science standards, and then adjusting our practices in the other units. So we're still making progress forward and really doing what's best for kids in terms of science.
How are you? Question for you.
Yes.
So now that we have the next generation science standards, does that mean, assuming that the park is still around, that there will be a park test for those standards?
So I can speak a little bit. I know that you've...
So the state is actually in a little bit of hot water right now with the federal government because of the fact that this year we did not administer as a state a science assessment, which is actually required by law. And so there are plans that they're putting into place right now. They have to respond to the federal government by June 1st about their plans for assessing all students in science at least once in 4th, 7th, and 11th grade. So we should tentatively plan to have a science assessment back next year. What that assessment looks like, we don't really know, because the reason why Illinois failed to implement a new science assessment this year is because there are not new ones available that align to the next gen science standards. So all of the other states that met those mandates just gave their oldest science assessment, and Illinois didn't want to do that because the old science assessment is aligned to the old standards and is paper-based, which was not like Park.
So yes, there will be a test. What it'll look like and when, we don't really know.
We have no idea.
All right.
Our contact with the state indicated that they should know in the next week to 2 weeks. That was sort of.
And you have contact with the state now, because I remember there was a while where
Yes.
people were in flux there, so we didn't have people to talk to. Right?
Yes, exactly. In this division, so
Yeah.
yeah, they're all in separate divisions, but yes, this division happens to be a former colleague of mine from Deerfield, and so we've been in contact with her.
Thanks.
Are the science standards national standards or are they individual?
Sure. So they partially are national standards. Currently the next gen science standards have been adopted by 9 states. There are several states that chose not to make that move because their existing science standards sort of they earned a grade of A in the area of those standards, so they didn't feel that there was a need to make a shift.
Surprisingly though, John, Illinois was not one of those, so just so you know.
So are the next gen standards considered something separate from the Common Core?
They are. The Common Core state standards are sort of the umbrella that encompass English language arts and math standards.
And that's it?
And that's it.
So this is separate, okay.
This is separate, but the beautiful thing that we've acknowledged is that there is consistency across the ELA or the English language arts, math, and science standards. So they all center around the idea of certain practices or identifying claims and evidence, argument-based, critical thinking, reasoning. So I think we're in a better place than we ever have been in terms of all of these standards having some commonality. And it's something that as our consultants have come in, and Rochelle has really been phenomenal in helping our teachers to make those connections and see those connections. And so moving forward, she's going to be essential in helping us to kind of plan and implement that. But one of the handouts that is in the board packet, it's not a part of this presentation, it's part of the proposal for the science, but it does include the shifts from sort of our former science standards to next gen. And I think there's nothing bad about these shifts. I think it makes sense in terms of what science really is and how we need to develop our young ones to really be science minded. All right, great questions. All right, and this is just kind of to sum it up. I didn't put a picture of a cycle because you think curriculum cycle kind of goes in a circle, and it's not really how things are feeling. Things are feeling like there's more choices to be made, but I feel very positive. I feel extremely lucky to be in a district with such hardworking teachers that are willing to dig into the curriculum writing, that are willing to be a part of conversations and have really given it their all. So I want to acknowledge their hard work and their commitment, the commitment of the building principals and the rest of the administrative team, because I think this involves all of us. So thank you for your time, and if you guys have any other questions, I'd be happy to address them.
So there's always an anecdotal story coming out of any of the parents on the board, but just last night, my sixth grader was talking about Alexander the Great or not so great, the DBQ that they have to do. And my freshman said, wait a minute, we just did that last year. We did the Alexander the Great DBQ as 8th graders. What are you doing as 6th graders? So my question is that a conscious decision? Is Alexander the Great considered maybe not such a complex subject anymore? Are we really pushing our 6th graders to do evidence-based discussions or writing?
There's
that much
absolutely
more quickly.
some coming there. It is absolutely coming down.
Yeah.
And we need them engaged in those practices and processes. And I think I would note that that's even happening prior to 6th grade.
Yeah.
But
Just last year, she said they did it in 8th grade, and now we're doing it in 6th grade. I just thought, wow, that's quite a change. And he really does seem to be doing much more advanced work as a 6th grader than even my daughter from 3 years before had been doing.
it's pretty amazing. I mean, even one of the things that I wanted to acknowledge with math is anytime you enter a math classroom at our elementary building or our middle school building, I'm blown away at what these little guys are working on. And it's truly impressive to think about how they are capable of it, and we're giving those opportunities. So the other part too is one of the things that with social studies is we may be moving around some of those units. So the content may shift, but we're certainly raising the level of expectation and rigor and thinking, and really giving them more open-ended questions in which we have some primary sources that they are able to grapple with some of that.
It's also interesting because it demonstrates that integration of the social studies curriculum and the language arts curriculum. No, it's not a new thing, but I think more conscious effort has been going into it since the Common Core, as I understand it.
Definitely. Yeah.
I think you're going to see a lot more of that in the science area
I see.
starting next year also,
Yes.
which is going to be critical because that's the area I hear the most comments from parents because we were waiting for the next gen science. And I'm surprised you asked the science test question because that's been all over the news. And we've just kind of been waiting. It was a front page story on the Tribune that the state got their hands slapped because we're behind on that. So I'm sure that Illinois will give it a lot of careful thought and time to develop. In other words, it'll probably be ready for us the first day of school and we'll have to figure it out. And we will.
And I think the seeds that we've begun to plant in terms of these shifts with next gen science standards, the science assessment that comes their way, our students will be prepared because we've elevated that level of instruction. They're thinking critically. They're going to be able to create a claim and support it with evidence and reasoning. So we are going to be fine.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I have another question. It sounds like there's great work going on in several areas at the same time. And I'm curious, when Joanne Trahanis was here, she brought us kind of a schedule that showed where they were doing curriculum review and when those were happening, sort of forecast that this will come back up again in 4 years or that'll come up. And I'm curious if we're maintaining that, if we're still on that schedule or if we have one.
It does still exist. We can still access it on the website.
We're still maintaining, but actually I think we've accelerated in some of the areas.
We've accelerated.
And the other piece is that, as Kelly talked about a little bit at the end of her presentation, sort of the nature of curriculum work has changed over the last several years. So where it used to be a situation that we could examine the standards in year 1, work on a textbook adoption in year 2, do this in year 3, do this in year 4, it is now a situation where we are constantly refining and going back to review what is working, what's not working based on those standards. So, less of a cycle and more of a ongoing and continuous improvement process.
Do we run the risk if we're doing it that way that we end up kind of putting out fires? In other words, okay, here's a place where our scores aren't doing well, so we're going to focus our attention. Well, we got to focus our attention here, and before you know it, it's been 3 or 4 years before you've done kind of that. I don't want to say overhaul, but that in-depth look at one of the areas.
You know, that's
Because I think that happened to us in the past, and that's where we're seeing such great improvement now. But I don't want to see us head back that direction.
If anything, I think we had this very conscientious decision this afternoon in our meeting. We went through all of our subject areas, and we don't want to inundate the teachers with every single area.
Right.
So, because truly, we have to look at every single subject area every year and say, okay, even though our math, we're proud of our math. We're doing a great job with math. So what are we going to keep doing for professional development and looking at what we're doing, and still then put the emphasis back on science and language arts. Right. So it's just, we're trying to be very conscious of, especially at the elementary school where our teachers are teaching all the subjects, that they're not out of their classrooms all the time learning everything new. We're trying to be very kind of weighted every year and build on it.
And I think that piece about integration is so key in the fact that now these standards are intentionally aligned. So there's documentation within the next generation science standards of how this particular units and concepts can connect with the English language arts standards and the math standards. So there's more opportunity for it to connect. So it's hard to separate things too much. Yes, we have to look at them individual in some ways, but I think because of some of that overlap and that integration, it's not the same as it used to be. So I know the exact document that you're referring to, the table with those, and I think maintaining that document is going to be essential for us to make sure that we are conscious and aware of where our focus and our...
I mean, maybe it keeps us honest a little bit, we said we were going to look at that this year.
We could actually bring that back when you guys do your board reports in June. We can just update that and kind of show general areas.
Right. I mean, so just as an example, when we used to adopt textbooks as part of a curriculum adoption, it was necessary to redo that and refresh that every 4 to 5 years or so. Now, when Angelmine comes out with their latest updates, they send them to us, and then the students have them instantaneously.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So some of that refresh process,
so maybe there's a different way to track it.
Exactly. That's in
as long as we're tracking it, right?
Yes.
As long as we're tracking
And
it.
we have to track it for every single subject.
Absolutely. Yep.
Because there's standards that we have to get in every single subject. One of the things that's not up here, we haven't done a whole lot with the fine arts. And so next year we have time set aside for the fine arts to start working and looking at their curriculum.
Great.
So we've got to make sure every subject area keeps up, but we're always conscious of that elementary school, the teachers that teach all the subjects, and not inundating them. So that would be a good document to bring at your board reports in June.
Okay. So you can move right into 9C, your update on
Yes.
science curriculum, right? Okay.
Science curriculum?
Yeah, so Susanna, if you want to come up, Susanna Porto, our 8th grade science teacher, is here this evening, and the entire team has been really important in this entire process. So I'm going to do a little bit of reading from a document that you don't have, but the structure is really, I'm going to share our philosophy surrounding science instruction. I'm going to talk about the process that we've been through, going to introduce a program the program that we propose for adoption for our 6-8 science teachers. Talk a little bit about the shifts, which you've got your hands on those documents, and Suzanne is going to share a little bit about, just coming from our science teacher perspective, why is this best for Lake Bluff, what really resonated with her and the other 2 members of our science department. So very quickly, I just want to acknowledge that in the area of science and science instruction, philosophy really centers around the idea that we value science instruction that utilizes hands-on, inquiry-based approach to learning. We believe students deserve opportunities to experience authentic science phenomena and must engage in experiences in which they can develop scientific explanations through writing and discussion. Lake Bluff Middle School students will discuss and write about discoveries, observations, questions as they begin to think like scientists while exploring the many worlds phenomena. So this process in reviewing materials and programs really started last year in the 13-14 school years. Anne Rochelle, as our consultant, who has done a lot of work directly with programs and in the area of science, in the world of science, has been alongside sort of recommending, reviewing with other districts, and giving us some targeted programs to look at, and really those to avoid. Because as new standards come about, a lot of publishing companies are very quick to say their program is aligned, and they just want you, they're ready to have you buy it, even though all they've done is slap a new sticker or put a new cover on it. So we knew that we needed to be very critical consumers to make sure that we're looking closely at the documents and programs to make sure that what they're saying is true. So we had the opportunity in March this year as a department, the science department and myself, to attend the NSTA, which is the National Science Teacher Association. Their national conference was here in Chicago at McCormick Place, which was a real gift for us. We didn't have to travel far, but we were able to be among sort of the biggest names in science education. Along with that, we were able to visit their expo hall, which was filled with materials and programs that would be available for adoption and use. So we spent a lot of time chatting with people, getting some sample materials, and really reviewing to see what might be best, if any, for us to move forward with in our proposal and adoption. After that March conference, we spent a full day previewing several different program materials. We had multiple rubrics by our side as we were looking to see, first of all, does this align to the standards? Does this align to documents within board policy about instruction and instructional materials? And then does it align with some modified rubrics that Anne Rochelle had prepared for us, again, sort of stemming off the next gen science standards. So through that work, we were able to identify a favored program, which is the iQuest curriculum. And iQuest stands for Investigating and Questioning Our World Through Science and Technology. Upon decision that this was the one that we were feeling most strongly about, I was able to reach out to various districts, surrounding districts in our area, to see who's already using this, who's kind of considering it. So I wanted to note that in Kenilworth, Joseph Sears School is currently using iQuest. Northbrook Glenview School District, District 30, is currently using the program. Parkview District 70, which is Skokie Morton Grove, has been using the iQuest program. So upon this review, referred back to Anne Rochelle, in which she commented that iQuest is rooted in claims, evidence, reasoning, and argument writing. And you have a document in front of you that lists the shifts of the next generation science standards. Our team went a little bit further and created another document in which we took sort of what science was, the shifts, and then we looked very closely at the iQuest program to document in which ways does this program target those new shifts. So I have additional copies if you're interested in reviewing this, and I'd be happy to email that as well.
Quick question,
Please.
because I think just for reference.
Yes.
When was the last time we bought science materials for curriculum?
That would have been late 90s, early 2000s.
Just wanted to share that.
So
Just why I'm saying, can we keep track of where we're going? have changed in the last 20 years.
A couple things.
Pluto is still a planet in our science books. So, yes.
So
back and forth.
Yes.
just a couple quick things I want to point out about this curriculum and why it resonated with myself, what really hit hard, and then I want to give Susanna some time to speak for the department because I think that they are the ones that have lived with this decades-old program that they have and are the ones that would be bringing in and implementing a new program. So one of the great things about iQuest is they would note it as a new world-class, rigorous, investigation-centered science curriculum. It's designed to challenge and engage middle school students in grades 6 through 8. So this is strictly a 6 through 8 program. Students investigate, they create, plan, and execute investigations while collecting and analyzing data. The great thing about this program is it supports our one-to-one initiative. So there is an electronic portal for students. They do have a student science notebook that would be a paper copy, but there is also the opportunity to go in electronically and document, collect data, respond. There's a huge emphasis on literacy and discussion. So one of the big things that the developers of the program have done is they've pulled endless amount of resources for teachers that are using the program to create opportunities for students to read and analyze not only charts and data, but they're going to be doing some close reading and analyzation of text as they build ideas and form sort of opinions and claims surrounding the evidence that they're able to not only observe but read about. Those are the big things that I think I want to point out about it. I want to give Susanna a moment and then I can come back if there are additional questions for me.
All right. I'm Susanna Corto. I teach 8th grade science. And I'm here representing Heidi Bailey, who teaches 6th grade science, and Brian DeYoung, who teaches 7th grade science. And we've been looking at these next generation science standards since before they were adopted and the impression they were going to be adopted. We've always liked them from the get-go. What they do is they take away from where Illinois before wanted us to have kids know stuff. Now they want kids to be able to do stuff. And we've always been having them do stuff, but it really helps give us kind of a framework and some legitimacy to what we always knew was right in the first place. And then it has caused these textbook companies to work to catch up to where we want to be. And this iQuest material, the first and foremost thing that both Heidi and Brian, along with myself, want to share is that we are very excited that it's new and current. Despite the fact that Pluto is not a planet in the current space science field, we're not teaching that it's a planet anymore. We've adjusted, and it's fine. So our kids are learning, okay, science, because we are up to date. But we do have had to skip over and find new supplemental stuff, and that'll happen. Things come and go. So that's our first thing is that we're very happy to be looking at new things. As far as the alignment with the next gen science standards, when we went to the NSTA convention and looked at all the materials, it really came down to 2 that looked like they were aligned. And then I think we looked at 3 that day in your office because Kelly found a third one that she liked. One of them was the current program is the SDC middle school program, which we have now. And as she was saying, it does look like they haven't adjusted a whole lot. Like they changed the hurricanes in the catastrophic event book. They change every 6 years. They go through this cycle of hurricane names. And the last hurricane ended in 2002. So now it's updated, so Katrina's not on the list anymore and that kind of things. But they really haven't changed a lot of the labs and the sciences inquiry. And what the next gen science standards are doing, and I think Mark, you were trying to get at this too with the Common Core, is that they are aligned with the Common Core. So when I'm not a language arts teacher and I'm teaching this reading component or writing lesson, it tells me, the teacher, what Common Core standard I'm getting at in math and in reading both. In every lesson, it's lined up for me. So I can say, hey, Anna Groth, I'm doing that in science, so I don't know all, and I can't know all of what she's doing because I've got my own stuff, but I know what I'm doing that can help her. And we're all very excited about that, and they're very excited, along with our library media director, Mallory Smith, to be able to get a handle on all of this working together. So that's a big thing that we're liking about this curriculum, is it is very strongly aligned and was created after the next gen science standards. And I guess one of the main authors was on the committee that helped make the Next Gen Science Standards. So that was a goal of his to make them aligned. Another thing that's really cool about it is that it builds across grade levels from the beginning of 6th grade to the end of 8th grade. So there's 4 units per grade level, and Unit 1, 6th grade, looks similar as the way that it builds. It starts with like an overriding question and then this word wall that goes, so they'll have a similar format, but by the time you get to the end of 8th grade, you're working at a little bit of a different level than you would at 6th grade, and it's kind of cool. You look at some of the books that she brought to see what 6th grade 1, I think 6th grade 1, we only have that online. If you look at 6th grade 1 versus 8th grade 4, where they've come from. So that's always a cool thing, and then it's nice also for us to see how it builds, where before we would be saying, okay, well, remember when you learned this, we read about it in this other book that wasn't the same. This is just kind of all ties it together. And then we know that somebody who's an expert has tied it together for us, so it just gives us more confidence that we're doing that building as we go along. And then also we like that the readings in this material are better aligned to the labs. It's sort of seen with the old unit that we might do something about a screw, and then for like simple machines, and then they're telling us, now we're reading an article about Archimedes in the bathtub, water falling over, and then he's going, so they would be unrelated reading things. And this, I think, is a lot more tied together, which you can see if you get a chance to look at this stuff. So I think those were the main things, brief, and I hope I was explaining that well, that we like about this curriculum, and we could definitely talk more and more about it if anyone wants to hang out with us and talk next gen science standards. We got a lot to say, and that we're excited about. So appreciate your listening tonight.
First of all, I love this approach. I should say I taught 7th and 8th grade science in the beginning of my career, and I was chuckling a little bit because I went to an NSTA meeting in 1970, and we were talking about increasingly using the scientific method in our classrooms and using lab-based methodologies to forward. So I wish you a lot more luck than apparently has happened in the last 40 years with respect to the development of this book. But the question I have is, one of the challenges we faced was, especially with the older teachers, we had a sizable staff, transitioning them from the typical classroom presentation methodology to a more lab-based approach where the kids participated more actually than the teacher did. We were guidance counselors almost in the classroom. We set up the labs, we allowed them to perform the experiments, and then we guided them with respect to the outcomes and what the differences were. How do you see with respect to, there are only 3 of you, so it's not going to be a huge challenge.
And I would also say that we've been already doing that. I think our styles are fairly similar, and that we do have them do the science. You rarely would find any of us giving much of a lecture. I think the most I would ever talk in a class period is at a time. It's 10 minutes. They start to get antsy. They want to. That's not why they're there in the room. Why aren't we going to do our lab? How come we're not doing a lab? So I think that graduates have been expecting to do labs as they go through. So I don't know that it's going to be that much as a shift for me or for Brian or for Heidi, but more of a release where we don't feel like we're not lecturing enough. Because I think that's something we've kind of felt in the past. It's like we have to do some more note taking, but really the notes that we're going to be able to concentrate on will be the notes that they take themselves on the data that they collect and the conversations they have with themselves. And so it should be pretty cool. It looks neat. I don't know.
Who publishes? What company provides iQuest?
So this is through Achieve.
These materials, by the way, are going to be kept over here, so after the meeting, if you want to stop and take a look at them,
And
you thought you might want to.
Password, and you can see everything in the textbooks online. It should be good.
Okay.
Yeah, this is, and it seems to me as a fairly newer publisher, Sangari Active Science. So they have sort of a separate division that does some K-5 program development. I think they need a little bit more time but I think their 6-8 stuff is right on, and that Krajak is one of the authors of Next Gen Science Standards, and he is also a developer of this program. So I think I would consider that to be a strength.
I got a question. We are going to talk about a little bit later on, and we've been talking about for weeks about renovations to the middle school. One of the things that keeps coming up about the renovations to middle school is the science labs and the idea of a STEM lab. How well does this new kind of curriculum fit with the idea of a STEM lab in the middle school? Would it be require reworking the whole thing all over again once we get a STEM lab, or does it feed into that?
How would adoption of this program impact the creation of a STEM lab?
Would it work with a STEM lab?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that with the connection of this to Next Gen Science Standards and that STEM, I mean, I feel like it's all interrelated
Comes
and
together.
connected. So I think it would
Enhance
access
it?
to resources. Exactly. You took my word. Yeah, it would enhance.
Okay, good.
I don't know if you have more to add.
I have a couple questions. I don't, sorry if anybody wants to jump in. Compared to the existing curriculum, does the new curriculum go deeper into the subject matter, or is it broader? Take a broader look at things. How does it compare in terms of depth and breadth?
Yeah. Kelly's probably less familiar with
The current.
the old versus the new. The Illinois State Science Standards had a lot of breadth to them and not much depth. There was definitely a lot of many things that we were possibly going to see in a standardized test that seemed more like science trivia than understanding how science works. So this is definitely looking at. I mean, we haven't lost the fundamentals of science, the things that you should know to graduate from 5th grade, 6th grade, 7th grade. That's clear there. But what they really are placing this emphasis on is what you should be able to do and how you would know what you know. And I really like it. And so I would say there's way more depth, and it gives a lot of opportunities for students to explore things on their own. There are avenues to take when a kid comes across something in their research or their lab activities where they want to kind of go another direction, where you can take them that way and without losing the information that they're supposed to be learning. It helps us as teachers keep them focused while doing what they perceive to be their own interests, where we're guiding them along the way. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but I like it, and I'm hoping to get in there and get a handle on how to make it all work.
Can you give me a specific example? I mean, how does that work? You mentioned the extreme weather unit. I mean, what is the lab work, or what goes with that?
Well, the extreme weather unit is I'm more familiar with the previous unit, the catastrophic events unit, which was the one that I was referencing, and then you don't have the new one.
Well, pick whatever one you want.
Okay, so well, for example, I could, because she handed me the chemistry one. What you would do is you would present them like, I'm going to open up any of these. Okay, so like each lesson starts with a question. So instead of saying in the past my lesson on phase change might be called phase change, now this one is how can we model the things gases do, and then they're going to create a model of what the molecules in gas look like, as opposed to me giving them that. And then the curriculum is having them, you present them with several different gases that they would then be investigating. And then if you're more interested in, say, helium than neon, then you can go and do your own thing. So, well, neon lights, that's kind of cool. Or what do you mean that the filament in a light bulb is argon? How can that be? What it looks like, I can see a wire there and then it lights up, but that's gas. So how can you do that is basically you would alter their writing component or their follow-up questions. So you can give them a similar activity, and then when they're asking you questions, you can make that their writing piece that they investigate further.
I think it's a lot more, yeah. The specific example would not come best from me, but it's just that idea that it's coming more from a broader question versus we're going to learn about this today, or I'm going to tell you about it, now you're going to experience it. It's more about, here's a question, we'll experience a series of labs or labs paired with short videos and reading, so then we can start to form some claims around what we think might be a potential answer to that question, and then support it with evidence from that lab or the reading or the video.
I know one of the challenges in changing math programs was just that transition from old math, or whatever we're calling it, to the current program. How do you see the transition going in this?
So one of the things that was really important to myself as I'm reviewing this, because I'm not able to provide adequate training with a brand new program. I can support them in the bigger concepts and understanding sort of the shifts in next gen, but the professional development that surrounds this program is very strong. That was one of my big questions as I talked with Northbrook 30. What was PD like? I see, they had the experience of Krajak, one of the writers, actually come to their school and led their teachers through that development. So I think that's going to be really important, that we're strategically planning that so that we have the opportunity for them to come in and launch this, that they're available for check-ins. I know they talked about strong support from the tech end, that someone was available at all times virtually to support with that piece. But it's more about the shifts in practices and their teaching, and we do have a very strong basis in inquiry learning. So they are starting with the experiences and the doing. So having professional development come in straight from the program is going to be really important. And I think that's a little bit of what we did with math. We have Anne Rochelle by our side as consultant as well, that supports this program and can train us in implementing to the best of their ability.
You want to go? I've hogged more than my time.
Well, I just want to say I appreciate all of your enthusiasm and all of the work that you put into this.
Yeah.
And I really mean that.
Yep.
So thank you, and thanks to the two other teachers that aren't here today. I really appreciate it.
It sounds like exciting stuff. I'm a science fan, so I would love to be involved in that again. My question is a little bit to help reassure the community, if anybody's ever watching these things. When the Common Core evolved and became adopted, there was a lot of misinformation, a lot of politics surrounding it. One of the things I heard a lot about, even in this community, but on the mainstream media, was about people's concerns that the Common Core standards limited what we could teach our kids. In fact, for us, it doesn't limit what we could teach our kids. It's a minimum standard. Is there any, and this is a question, it's kind of a softball question to reassure the community, is there any limitation on what you can teach kids in the next gen science standards? And where can you go with it?
Next Gen has been very careful to say that one of the things they wanted to do is leave things. They never wanted to tell teachers how to teach or what to teach. They were just creating these standards. And so if you I don't know if I said that right, but they basically were saying, we're going to throw out, like, these are the things that we think we owe children in this country if the states adopt it as scientists, as young scientists, and we're putting people out in the world for scientific literacy, understanding science as a field. And so what they always said from the beginning is that we're not going to tell teachers how to teach. And so that's one of the things that they've left open. So I don't think so. I think that if anything, they've made it better for us by, again, not giving us this list of facts that's ever changing, but instead just really how to do science.
I would agree. I think it's one of the other documents that you've got has the practices and the cross-cutting concepts. So this is really at the core of the next gen science standards. And so these aren't about specific content necessarily. You've got the disciplinary core ideas connect more with that, but it's more about the practices and what we want students to be engaged in and how they approach questions in the scientific world. So I don't think that it's limiting by any means.
This will be implemented in the fall?
Yes.
Once the curriculum adoption is approved on May 26th, then we purchase the materials over the summer. It goes in next year's budget, and we set up our professional development to get this rolling.
I'm going to come over and sit in.
Yeah, it sounds
I'd
exciting.
love to have you.
So and I just want to note with that, we've had some very careful conversation about what the rollout will look like and how will we transition, so that we're making sure that there aren't any holes created in this adoption. So what we would propose is that 6th grade would be full adoption. 7th grade is going to be about 50%, and then 8th grade would be 75%, because of the way that they recommend the pacing and the placement of the units. We don't want to, if a student had matter in 6th grade, they don't necessarily need to have that matter unit again in 8th grade. So we have proposals and plans for how that rollout can be done very intentionally, so students are, some of the approaches may be different, we want to make sure that we're consistent.
So after a year, everybody be 100%?
I think there'll be one, I think 8th grade will take another because
Right.
there's things that are being taught in 8th grade. This year they're going to 6th grade, and then there's some things
Oh,
in
okay.
7th that
So
are coming to
it
8th.
might take a
So
few
we're
years.
just making sure that
Yeah.
we don't like teach force and notion to the 7th grade this year and then the 8th next year. So we're gonna switch it around. So
They're
it's
making a transition.
fully
Yeah.
aligned. So the names of the units or whatever, or the content covered won't be doubled up or missed by students that are currently enrolled. So if you're starting 6th grade next year, you would get all 3 years full, and then by the time these 6th graders get 8th grade, all be done.
Yeah, you'll be
Yeah.
doing fully.
The whole deal. We have we broke out, well, for sure we want to make sure, so we got it covered.
The other comment I wanted to make is we have not left elementary school out. Middle school is a little bit further ahead, and again, that juggling act at the elementary school, we're going to be doing a lot of focus on language arts, and we don't want to inundate them because they're out for every subject. So we're starting with them in a couple other different ways and looking at adoption for them in the following year.
Correct.
How about conversations with District 67 and 115 about this new site curriculum?
So what's a little bit different about 67 in terms of science, they're not moving forward with iQuest currently. I think that they're continuing to look at and research. I spent a little bit of time at the conference with their current director of instruction, and right now I think they're feeling okay about where they're at. I've been in close conversation with them about where we're going and just how excited and connected our teachers feel to this program, but that's not in their current future, I don't believe.
Any other questions?
But you must have a good level of comfort that this will prepare people for high school.
Absolutely. And I have done some reaching out with the high school. I haven't heard a whole lot back at this point. There was some involvement in our early meetings. I think it was in the winter. Jim Sullivan joined us in our meeting, and he seemed to be very interested and supportive of the fact that our middle school teachers are on and very aware of the happenings. So in terms of the adoption of this program, I haven't had a lot of conversation with him about that, but we'll continue to reach out and seek feedback.
Sounds like 67 looks to us to see what we adopt and then moves forward.
Thanks, Mark.
I do
that
think
will be picked up.
we include their department chairs because Jim was out. They did talk about the curriculum with him. Because and we do the same thing with math. We've done same thing with language arts. So we're really I'm trying to get everybody to develop a cycle so that we evaluate all of our different subject areas with them. And I think we're moving in that direction.
Good.
We're not
I mean,
there
I
yet.
would view that as important. And when I hear about a curriculum that is focused on doing rather than learning, or that wasn't the word you used, right? That sounds exciting, but of course one wants to be sure that the learning and the memorizing of the key facts is part of that, so that they are on track for the high school work. So, good luck with that.
Yeah, it's absolutely done, I think, in a more authentic manner, so that the items that in the past we may have memorized perhaps have more meaning because they're connected to an experience.
Right, that would be the hope.
Yes.
You know, lab work, I remember there was a time when it was just kind of fooling around too. You know, there are those phases, but with good teacher control and good labs, hopefully that isn't a problem in this age group.
So I'm going to leave these materials here for the rest of the evening, and then they're going to be on display at the elementary school in the front office.
We're going to leave them on display until the end of the school year in case parents want to come in and look also.
I think that's a great idea. If parents want to look
We'll
at
put
this.
on notice out that they're on display and
Maybe we can
parents
put
wanna come by and see them.
remind people of that somehow on our website or.
Have we done that with other subject areas too, or is this particular?
No, I just think it's a good habit to start
So you would
because
do it with all the areas?
I would do it with anything we're gonna adopt a curriculum
Okay.
type thing. I think it's important that parents know, because some parents may be interested in coming in and looking. So,
Especially in this town, for sure.
thank you so much for coming in tonight.
Thank you.
We really appreciate it,
Thanks.
and we're excited for you guys.
And if you're getting rid of your Trivial Pursuit Science Edition, that was my favorite one, so I'll take that.
Your boys like to Planet Earth vegan.
Okay, so Kelly's going to stay at the podium
ahead.
and move on to the language arts curriculum.
Welcome back.
Long time no see.
I know. My name's Kelly Bay. I'll be your host.
Do you want to make sure you introduce our
Yes.
other two teachers?
Sure. So I have Buffy Stoffer, reading enrichment, well, all enrichment specialist, joining me this evening. Buffy, when she shares some ideas in just a moment, can talk a little bit about her history with the district, because I think that's really important as we consider bringing in new writing program, sort of what things look like and how this has evolved and changed for Buffy specifically as a teacher of writing. I also have Kathy Kushinpour with me this evening. She is a 4th grade teacher at our elementary school. So I'm going to kind of kick us off in a very similar way, talking about the basics, the philosophy, our process, and I will try to be brief about this next program that we're proposing to the board this evening. We are looking at Lucy Calkins' Units of Study. It's a K-8 writing program that supports students in the areas of opinion and argument writing, informational writing, and narrative writing. So let me quickly share a philosophy on writing here within the district, and then talk about our process and what we've been sort of experiencing and going through. So we value writing instruction that teaches the writer through mini lessons, conferences, and sharing. We believe writing instruction should progress K-8 through the writing cycle, which includes planning, drafting, revising, editing, and publishing. We value the empowerment of all writers within a collaborative writing community. Writing across the curriculum is an opportunity for all teachers to be teachers of writing. So a little bit of background about where we've been and where we'd like to head. Last spring, at the end of the 13-14 school year, there was some review of K-5 core reading programs. And I think while this is a writing program, I want to mention the fact that we brought in some core reading programs because those programs included writing components to them. And so we had the opportunity to review some other programs through that search. We were not successful with the reading because we didn't believe anything out there was best for Lake Bluff, and did not want to move forward with any of those items and wanted to give publishers some additional time. On the other hand, Lucy Calkins has been a pivotal member of the writing community for a very long time. She is sort of lead in the New York Reading and Writing College, and is just the guru. I mean, she is the name in the world of writing instruction. And so currently, before this year, our teachers were implementing sort of sporadically. We had Lucy Calkins' former units of study. And so just to clarify, those units came in kits that were for kindergarten through 2nd grade and 3rd through 5th grade. So all of our kindergarten, 1st, and 2nd grade teachers had this same kit. And at the time when she released these units of study, it made sense and it fit, and teachers kind of just worked through that writing instruction. When the Common Core State Standards came out, Lucy Calkins and her team knew that they needed to do something differently. They needed something that was targeted for each specific grade level. And so when this was released, Joanne Trahanis, sort of under her guidance, the ELA committee got their hands on some of the sample units. We were able to review these, look through them, and see just how much they had changed, and how zooming in and allowing each grade level to have multiple units to teach writers was that much powerful. So this fall, we had year 1 sort of test implementation of these units of study. So up until this point, our kindergarten through 5th grade teachers have been testing out the units of study. At the 6th grade level, our 6th, 7th, and 8th grade language arts teachers had been testing out the units of study. So we went into this saying, let's try the informational and let's try the argument. These are the two new big pieces of writing that our students don't have as many experiences in. And so we've had, through this test opportunity, time to meet, reflect, and determine if this is the best tool for our teachers and our students moving forward. And based on being here tonight, we have decided and would love to propose this program to the board. We did meet as a very small writing curriculum to review this program under board policy guidelines. We had a few other tools that helped us to understand, is this aligned, is this rigorous enough for our students, and is it going to give them the skills and strategies they need to be successful as writers. A few other districts that are using Lucy Calkins' unit of study. A neighboring Lake Forest is moving forward with adoption. They will be bringing in the units next school year for the 15-16 school year. Barrington School District, Winnetka School District, Northbrook 30, Evanston 65, and Van Eckburn are also districts that I thought would be important to note are currently using Lucy Calkins' units of study. I think this is very widespread, so these are just some examples of districts. I'll move forward with the focuses. So again, these grade level units of study provide teaching points, mini lessons, conferences, small group work, and they really bring in this comprehensive writer's workshop. So if you imagine the scenario that the teacher is in front of the classroom for a maximum of 10 minutes and she's conducting what's called a mini lesson. So she's modeling an experience. Perhaps I'm seeing at the 4th grade, Boxes and Bullets is an opinion argument writing unit. So within that teacher guide, there are many mini lessons or sessions in which the teacher is modeling or demonstrating a particular skill or strategy to support the students as writers. So she's going to model and show them what that looks like, and then give them time to practice that as she or he floats around the room to have conferences and give feedback on their writing. And so because this is so rooted in Writer's Workshop model, which is really best practice for our teachers, it's really a must pick in that feature. It fosters high-level thinking. There are many chances for students to synthesize, analyze, and critique, which are sort of keywords that connect with Common Core state standards. It's going to build independency and fluency. And it's going to allow students to refine their strategies across the curriculum. So what they're learning in an opinion argument writing unit is going to connect to what they learn about informational writing and what they learn about narrative writing. So there's a lot of work that's been done behind the scenes to pull this program together in terms of a progression about where does a kindergartner start and how do they move through each of their years as a writer. I want to give some time for Buffy and Kathy to share a little bit about how it's different. It aligns with some of the key shifts in Common Core. So I want to note that there's regular practice with complex texts. So the units of study really highlight powerful, what we call mentor text. So a sample piece that shows how a writer with that has written perhaps a children's book or an informational article is going to demonstrate a skill or strategy. So you're going to be looking at some very high-level complex text to model what that looks like in true writing. It's grounded in evidence, so this is going to connect to your reading, writing, and speaking standards. And then finally, it's going to build knowledge through content-rich nonfiction. So as I talked about, bringing in authentic text that helps students to see what a writer of informational text, how they're going to use similar strategies and techniques in their writing. I want to give Buffy and Kathy an opportunity to talk a little bit about how this program is different for them. I think that they'll share sort of their years of experience in teaching writing and how this feels different. And they're going to talk a little bit about what they're noticing about the students, because after just this first year, this test year implementation, we have learned so much, and I think we've seen some phenomenal results. So I want to give them an opportunity to share that with you.
Hi, again, I'm Kathy Christian-Poor. I teach 4th grade, and what I've noticed as a teacher of this writing program is the progression. Kelly sort of touched on this, but the progression and the connection of all the skills that sort of go in all of the units of study that are in the 4th grade curriculum. And I know that there's a scope and sequence that goes K-8, but the one thing that I really like about the 4th grade one is the fact that as a teacher of writing, I can have my kids learn the strategies of writing instead of just writing to come to an end product, which I feel in the past has really been the goal, to get a written piece done. But with all these skills together, we can actually have something that comes together, and all the little mini lessons together make something that sort of flows. The other thing that I want to point out is in this unit of writing, it ends up that there's checklists and rubrics. And the rubrics are helpful for the teacher. The checklists are something that the students fill out. So then they too end up being accountable for their own writing, and they end up taking ownership. And what I learned this year is that my kids love writing. They always want to write about their narrative. They were even asking if they could do another narrative, but there's not enough time in the year. We've done a couple of the persuasive pieces, and then we also did an informational piece, which actually tied in our social studies curriculum with the information, the essay, and the argument. So as a teacher of writing, I'm really pleased with this program. I think it's going to be very beneficial for us as we move forward.
Can you put your finger on why you think they love it now compared to they didn't?
I think what it was before is it was just a spattering of different mini lessons. You know, we might say, oh, let's take a look at how we could make a lead in the story be something that grabs your interest. Mm-hmm. But it wasn't something that, like all these mini lessons were disconnected. And I think the way that Lucy developed these books now is she starts at the very beginning. She, you know, helps us as teachers set up what the writing workshop should look like. And then she goes step by step. They're little mini steps that go in a progression. And I think for them and for me as a teacher of it, it just is so much more logical. Before it was just pulling, you know, sometimes I would pull a mini lesson from Ralph Fletcher, and then I pull another mini lesson from Lucy, and then I pull another mini lesson, just so that I could get.
So this all feels more coordinated to them, and they see the big picture maybe.
Right, right. And the other thing that they see is that, you know, I'm writing with them, mm-hmm. and so they see me as a writer also. So we're just like a little community of writers, and they just always want to write, cool. Which is great because that's where the Common Core is headed towards.
Good. Thank you.
My name is Buffy Stoffer. I am an enrichment specialist K-8, and I have had the fortune of teaching a lot of writing in a lot of classrooms across the district, and even in other districts with other writing programs. And it gives me a very unique perspective because I've had a chance to watch children grow as writers, or in the case of some of the other programs I've seen, really not even consider themselves as writers. And I think that, as Kathy mentioned, one of the tremendous strengths of this program is the children truly feel powerful as writers, that they have a voice, that they can actually potentially change the world as a result of their writing. It allows teachers to write with kids, which, as Kathy mentioned, is community building, and that's incredibly important because anyone who has any experience with writing, it is personal, and you have to be able to put yourself on the page. I think that some of the most impressive things I've seen are the amount of writing, the interest in writing. These units all provide children with choice while still expecting them to meet particular milestones on those checklists. It's a very cohesive program in that you are able to layer it on top of science and social studies. We just completed a unit about writing lab reports in 2nd grade, and the 18-page report about their catapult that they created and the fair test that they had done. It was remarkable, and we have kids that are may not consider themselves writers just jumping for joy when they get the opportunity to do writing along with science. So it, in my opinion, is an incredibly powerful program. Lucy Calkins is the name in writing, and she has been, but she has completely outdone herself with this particular new set of units. And I realize the excitement about science may not be matched in the area of writing, and I'm okay with that, but I am a huge, I do really feel strongly about the opportunity that the kids in the district have as a result of this particular curriculum.
How does it progress from grade to grade? Let's take second grade to third grade. What changes between, or second to fourth? What changes in that progression?
Well, a lot of things change, although what Lucy has done a remarkable job of is giving children these, giving these writers an opportunity to realize that a good lead in an information piece probably has some things we can teach ourselves about a good lead in a narrative and a good lead in a persuasive piece. And so as kids start to see the connections between these and they start to grow in their, basically their toolbox of writing strategies, and they move through the grades, they're able to take all of those different pieces and use them in so many different ways. So to watch a second grader write that final report, which actually was a book on a topic of their choice, so anything having to do with force and motion, and they had to layer sort of a how-to format on top of force and motion. So we had students doing horseback riding and how force and motion relates to horseback riding. To see that amount of writing happen at second grade, when you move to third grade and you are expecting yet another set of skills to be added to what they already know, the sky is really the limit. So between the amount of choice that kids are given with this guidance, and again, it matches right up with what Susanna was saying about science. We're guides on the side, we're not lecturing, we're not telling kids this is your final product and this is when it's due. We're really helping kids to develop those tools that writers will use from now until all the way through college. So.
Scientists, right?
Yes, they do.
Scientists, right?
And that's exactly what we've learned. We've got a lot of second grade scientists that did a lot of writing this spring. So. Thank you.
Anybody have any questions?
Well, I just think that there is plenty of excitement about writing, and I love hearing you talk about kids as writers and having their voice, because I think that plays across all the subjects and really who they grow up to be, you know. So
it's cool. It's very exciting.
I do want to point out one thing. The passion in these two ladies is undeniable, and I may just put Kathy on the spot for a moment. I think that she is a perfect evidence to show that this program supports the teacher just as much as it supports the student. So I think, Kathy has developed professionally as a teacher of writing, and it's because of these units of study. I'd love to say that there were, we did training, we provided some supports, but a lot of this comes straight out of reading those lessons and the sessions. And so I'm so proud of Kathy. I'm proud of many of our teachers, and I think that the more time that they have to implement this, and as the years move along, they'll just strengthen their practice. So that's another piece that I think is important to note.
Are you guys going to be doing, let's say we roll this in next year, the way we talked about science as well? Are you going to be doing that studio learning model where you bring teachers in to watch you guys implement it? Or?
That would be a huge goal for me. Yes, absolutely. I think that just they learn a lot, and Kathy, you could speak to it too. You don't necessarily have to, but going in, Kathy was actually one of our studio model teachers. So the fourth grade teachers went into Kathy's room, and we were able to give her feedback, and I think that that's only going to strengthen our teachers' ability to sort of implement this and impact students, and I would think that they would welcome that as well, and I would advocate for that studio model in any and all areas, and maybe on a more informal level, that it's maybe one teacher going into another teacher instead of all of us flooding, but then we can come back and have those conversations. So there's a lot of different ways that can look.
I think the other thing that I just want to mention again, it's been said a couple times, this is something we will be working with Lake Forest on. Lake Forest 67, they're in pretty much the same place we are. So it'll be a lot of good bonding time and a lot of good working together towards a common goal. So what will happen is at the next meeting, we are going to bring, in fact, if I could get maybe some links or something to send them for the two areas. There's curriculum you can look at. I'm going to get that out to parents. But you'll be approving the curriculum and then we'll budget for it and you'll be approving the purchase through bills. So you actually approve the curriculum and then you approve the purchase. And that approving the curriculum will be at the May 26th meeting so we can move forward. Thank you both for coming tonight.
That was good, thanks.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. I think that concludes my portion.
All right, so we're going to go back up to 9A and Lake Bluff Middle School renovations and fund balance. And Jay and Jean will discuss projections and possible ways of funding the middle school renovations. And Leanne and I will give you a little update on the last, I can't remember the name, not facilities committee, steering committee meeting.
So we're going to start with fund balance, and I think Jay, if you could kind of walk us through the 5-year projections and kind of what the differences were between the last one and this one. And
Sure. We provided a fund balance, a 5-year projection of fund balance at the last, I think it was 2 meetings ago, and this was done by PMA, our financial advisor, modeled it for us. I took a second look at it, went in and kind of built my own model, and worked with and went through their model to see what the assumptions were. And I made some changes to the assumptions based on I think there was probably a lot, maybe too much conservatism in the original forecast, and as well as I'll delineate some of the specific items. But my current projection, which I feel is kind of middle of the road, it's not aggressive or conservative. I'd have to maybe say it was 60-40 aggressive to conservative, so might be a tad on the aggressive side, but still very realistic. So the initial fund balance at year 5 was at $6 million, and there were just some differences in the model that accounted for a small portion of that. And then when I had given him our retirees, there was just a miscommunication, and we have a lot of people who are going out this year, and he had he had the year 4 people, basically the people who declared today who are going out in 4 years, and the people who declared 4 years ago and are going out today was reversed. So we were carrying retirees for a lot longer than we should have been in his model, which makes a significant difference in the final outcome, because those are our highest paid teachers, and that accounted for $500,000 of fund balance. So when I account for just those two things, I'm at $6.9 million of fund balance. And then essentially, if you look at it, I can break it down into kind of revenue assumptions and expense assumptions. Revenue assumptions accounted for another $1 million. If you look at our tax projections, basically our old model did not account for any of the new development.
Excuse me, what document are you working off of right
Oh,
now?
I'm sorry, I didn't know that.
We're working on this one, the one that we have,
Alright.
second page.
Well, actually,
Can I?
you're working on the second page of that, I think.
Right.
It's talking about the
back
reconciliation.
page.
So I was going to say, I don't see
If you flip to the back,
The numbers on the right-hand
there's
side.
a page.
Reconciling the old numbers versus the new.
Got it now.
So-
You have it?
That's it, yeah.
Sorry. So essentially, we're at a $9.5 million fund balance today, and the big top line is I project that is going to remain relatively flat. We'll probably have expenditures exceed revenues in the projection only slightly, and some of the big pieces are just differences in the model that I built versus the one that we were using for PMA. Revenue assumptions, we basically were just very conservative on new property in the previous model, not accounting for any of the target property revenue or
some of the other developments that are going on in on 176 or the new housing that's been talked about.
One question there, you said 8 million in new property,
Yes,
but
and that's an assessed value of the new property.
how does that tie into the 14 million that's presented here in the top line?
Because we had projected 6 before, so it was 1.5 million a year.
That's the
in the old
incremental,
projection.
okay, gotcha.
And I increased 1.5 million. And if you look at a 10-year history, we've never been that low before. So we were projecting less new property than we'd seen in the last 10 years.
And the leaf in year 3 is the new development?
Is the new? That's when the target development should
Year
come.
3
out.
million is pretty consistent with where we were in year 0.
Right.
Okay.
We typically see about $3 million a year in new
Okay.
property. Housing is coming back, and property values are increasing,
Right.
and
Okay.
we're seeing more development. So I don't think that is overly aggressive. CPI, we're basically projecting out at 2%. That's unchanged. We made a collection rate assumption, so typically we don't collect 100% of our taxes because people file for tax reassessments and things like that. But we were projecting 99%, which is probably too low. I mean, we don't lose that much to people appealing their taxes. So I increased it up to 99.5%, which is more in line with historical numbers. We had in our other assumptions, we basically mirrored all staff raises to what the teacher's contract says. And so when I changed it from those raises, which you see to the right, to a more conservative salary increase estimate, that accounted for some of the change. A big change is also in health insurance. At the time we did the original projection, we didn't know what our health insurance was going to come in at, and the trend in health insurance is about 5%. We saw significant reductions this first year in health insurance premiums in our cooperative because we've had good experience and because our rates going into the cooperative were probably on the high side based on historical experience. It's likely that we will continue to see some flat to decreasing projections, which is kind of an upside in this forecast, but I didn't want to project that out. And then also we made some staffing reductions that we brought to you in the spring that were not reflected in that other model. So this includes the reduction in staff.
This is pretty close to what we had
In the fall.
in the fall.
Yes.
Okay.
Very close.
I will say that our current fund balance is probably overstated by about $200,000 because it doesn't account for our summer health insurance premiums. We're kind of expensing it as we go, but technically we owe, the teachers have earned that insurance and we owe it. We should reflect that liability for the summer as of the end of the school year for those 2 months, and we're not doing that. I think I can cover that in this year without taking an expense hit, but I'm gonna try to do that. So I did not reflect it in here, but if we're not able to cover that expense, we may need to expense $200,000 of insurance before the end of the year, which would bring our current fund balance down a little bit.
So the bottom line is with and I call them now the vetted projections, because this was built on Jay's model that he built, which took him some considerable time, but we both have a lot more confidence in the numbers. You can see that if we just continue what we're doing without any expenses for the middle school, also without any projections in here on what's going to happen with the state, which I'm going to get to in a minute. In 1920, we'll have 9.27 million.
2020.
2020. Sorry. So 2020.
1920.
So, and believe it or not, I wasn't alive then.
Oh, I see. Year 1920.
So,
I get it.
I think it's really important. We can speculate, and there's a lot of speculating going on at the state level. As I sent 2 emails today on the possibility of property tax freezes. They were going to take the vote. All I've gotten alerts on my phone for tonight is the Bulls lost, so I don't think they they did that. I don't think they took the vote, which is good. But there is no question that we're going to have something from the state imposed on us, whether it's pension reform, legislative changes, property tax freezes. But the bigger issue is going to be it can't all come, because even with one imposition, it's going to bankrupt many school districts across the state. So it's important, though, that you note that these projections don't include possibilities from the state. That's important. It's also important to note that our current board policy calls for a minimum of 30% of our fund balance, because those are going to be things that are going to come up as we start talking about costs to the middle school. As Leanne and Mark give you kind of the synopsis of our last couple of steering committee meetings, they will probably actually share some general costs, because that was presented to us at the last meeting. White is coming to our next meeting. We will be doing our approvals on the items in this board packet, and White is coming in to do a presentation. They've taken all the work from our last meeting and they've gotten it down to 2 proposals that they're going to bring, and we're going to have to decide.
That's up in the air, isn't it? It was maybe 2, maybe 3, depending on what we see this next time.
2 to 3, but he's going to try to get it to 2, depending on what we see Thursday. And then we're going to have to determine what we're going to do, what we're not able to do in those costs, and what we are able to do with those costs, and how we're going to fund it. And then you run into questions, which are common questions that you have at home. Do you spend more money out of our fund balance and take the risk on what's going to happen with the state and bond later? Or do you pay half and half? Maybe we bond some, we pay for some. There's going to be some decisions that we're going to need to make here. And I think that we need to be very conscious, and I've said this before, that we have to do this project the right way. I wasn't here for what happened at the elementary school, but we have to be very open and honest and transparent with our community, which we have. I'm happy to announce that our tab on our website, LBMS Renovations, is up, and there are documents posted in it now. So all of our meeting minutes are on there.
If the bond alternative is potentially realistic, I'd like to have some more information with regard to what our options are, given the current bond market and how we might position that.
I did not even set him up to say that, and that was going to be the next thing I was going to say. I think just so that you have the ability to have different options is important. And so I think Jay and I will have to put our heads together. It might be nice to have a little bit more of that information at the next meeting, too.
Absolutely.
The earlier, the better.
Because at 30%, we're going to have, if we stick to that as our minimum, it's roughly $5 million, assuming that your projections
That can come out of pocket.
that come out. No, that's the minimum.
Oh, what's left over?
Minimum fund balance that we have to have.
Yeah.
So that gives us some flexibility of $4 million. But like any projection, slight error in the initial years, like shooting off a rocket. You miss the moon if you're off by 2/10 of a second here. It could change pretty dramatically, so we have to keep close to that. But roughly $5 million gives us $4 million to play with.
The tail on this curve, if we take $4.5 million out of fund balance to pay for middle school, does that accelerate the direction in which the curve goes over time, or would you expect it to be the flat projection?
We'd have the same shape, it would just be
$4 or $5 million lower.
We talked about potentially if we bonded interest only with the principal coming due when the existing bonds expire, correct?
Depending on how we bond it.
Yeah.
I think it depends on how we do it. If we do, if we go to referendum, we have a lot more flexibility in terms of how we structure the debt. If we use non-referendum debt, then we're limited to, we have a certain amount of debt service each year that we can utilize,
Okay.
and then we would have
That's the
less
sort of
flexibility.
alternative
That's
I think
when
we need
we
to
have-
explore.
Yeah, and that's what we have to, and you may not decide to do that. I think you just have to have all the information
So
available to make those
not tonight.
decisions.
We're not going to talk about the debt portion of this tonight.
No, we'll have that along with the white presentation at the next meeting.
Do you want us to talk about the
Steering
steering
committee.
committee? Moving first.
And maybe some potential costs so people hear the ranges.
So we've been meeting for a couple of months and every other week, and it's interesting talking to the architects because I've at each meeting kind of been demanding more information about what this is going to cost, and to be able to come back here and really get the conversation going with the board. And at the same time, so they would like to provide us with information about what the costs are going to be, but they need more information about what is needed and what is wanted in order to do that. So it's sort of a dance. As we get closer to knowing what we would want to have happen, price information can get more precise.
It's
As
starting
we
to come
get more
together.
cost information, then the board can get more clear on what direction we want to take. So the committee has really looked at a lot of options for remodeling the middle school, and kind of had a goal of narrowing that down to 2 or 3 options to come back to the board and say, look, this is what the recommendation is of a group of administrators, teachers, community members, a couple of board members, ranges for costs, and I'm reluctant to even kind of say because
Wide ranges.
it may not be meaningful until you really see what those dollars could and could not do for us. But it looks like around 5 million to 7.5 million is probably the ballpark of what we're talking about. And we'll have to look really realistically at what that's going to do.
That comes with a lot of choices between
Huge
the
amount of
5 and the 7.
Huge
Seven.
amount of choices.
Yeah.
They talked about, so far we're looking at 3, we've boiled it down to 3 kind of broad options. The first is not doing any additions to the existing facility whatsoever. It's working with the current walls. And depending on what you do within that box of no additions, you're looking at from the low end of bare bones, what they call it, light and bright, mostly just paint and caulk and stuff, from 3.7 million to a high end of 6.8 million. The next level of renovation they talked about was a single addition and that would be over in the fine arts area, and you're talking about a low end of 4.7 to a high end of 7.4 million.
And by doing the fine arts area, it allows us to get our academics in better placements within the building.
Yeah, all upstairs, I think.
That's a key piece.
Yeah, that allows you to take things out of the basement. The more high-end option was 2 additions, one for fine arts and one for forget what the addition. The second one was over by the current social worker's office. But you're looking at a low end of 5.5 million to a high end of 8.6 million. Huge ranges. There's so many choices within this. One of the things we're doing is documenting all the different. Gene and Nate and the architects are documenting a list of things that the trade-offs that we're making at each one of these, so that if you look at one option, you're giving up this, and this.
But you're getting this, and this.
Yeah, an interesting conversation that we had, that we said, okay, when we started hearing some of the numbers, they're like, wow, that's getting big. Should we be talking about a new school? If you were to just tear it down and start from scratch and build a brand new school, what order of magnitude are we talking about? And we can't hold them to this, but this is, very rough. A very experienced estimator was able to, do rules of thumb and use the back of his envelope, and you're in the neighborhood of $20 to $25 million for a brand new building. So I think that puts in perspective that, yes, these numbers are big, but we really can't go to that $25 million range.
And they said the building is very sound.
Yeah.
And very able to handle the renovations for an extended period of time.
Sound, but at the same time, there are complications, if you will, for that building because we've done this kind of renovation several times. So we've added a piece, and then we've added another piece, and then 10 years later another. And so you have different elevations, and you have things that were done at different levels of code or whatever, and that adds a little. So what I keep saying, and I'm sure. I don't want to just claim credit for, but I just think we have to be really smart about doing whatever we do in a way that we don't leave it with as many problems as we're facing right now.
Yep.
So
With an eye to the future.
we want to continue to have this as our strategy, then we need to make renovations with an eye towards what's happening, even the next go around.
Are the current, I said I don't remember the presentations as well, are the current designs to accommodate an enrollment base roughly where we are today, or a declining enrollment as we are projecting?
Where we are today, if not the ability to expand to accommodate more in the future, really. They're not projecting the enrollment to decline to such an extent that it would be worth shrinking the capacity of the building. And in fact, the conversation went in the direction that if you build a lighthouse type school that attracts people to your district, it may in fact be a draw in and of itself and potentially increase enrollment because of that new building. We've heard stories that people have walked away from the district because of the current building. So, no, it's not designed to handle reduced capacity.
I think the key piece that Leanne just said is what I walked away from at each meeting. I think it's important that we make our decisions, but also think to the future and think, okay, in 10 years from now, the next group of people may want to add this to the building or do this. And the way that building is situated, even down the road 20 to 25 years from now, they could do renovations around some of the old part of the building and get rid of that and keep the newer parts and build on in different directions. So it is very piecework, which brings a lot of complications. On the other hand, it also presents some options for the future for new boards and people that are sitting in our seats 20 years from now, which I think is important too.
So we're meeting again this Thursday, and I think this Thursday, and the goal is to get it down to whatever it is we're presenting, White's presenting it at the next board meeting. So it's whether it's 2 or 3 drawings, but to take a look at what they took out away from last meeting and see if that meets our needs to present.
I think the final thing that we're going to do, and it's something that I remember really talking to Richard about way back when they came, as soon as we have this week's meeting, Nate's going to go back and pull kids and start talking to them about, show them some drawings and get some student feedback on them also before the board meeting.
Yeah.
So
A couple of comments. One is I'm not concerned, I guess, about narrowing it down to 2 drawings by the next meeting. I guess my preference would probably be to stay at the 3 rather than to work hard to bring it down to 2. The other comment I have just from the presentation that you were talking about was I just want to make sure that people understand that even though the area in which the one addition that you were referencing in the second model would be at the fine arts area, that is not where we wouldn't be spending all this money to add to the fine arts area. It's to completely redo, as I understood it, the science area. So it's just that I just don't want any misimpression
from under down.
Right. But the physical location of what the build on would be does not dictate where all the improvements would come.
Right.
And you'll see in the drawings that even though a possible addition could occur there, that, for example, like the science rooms would get a major change.
Right. I remember things in the early drawings, things were moving sort of in all different places, and I just didn't want anyone to leave this discussion thinking that we're thinking about a $5 million addition.
No, it's not. And another point that came up that I wanted to make that made me think of that is I think it was a key point that they're trying to find ways to bring departments together. Right now, for example, math is broken up in a couple different places. Fine arts, we have art in the basement and band and chorus in the basement, band upstairs. So they're, in addition to renovating and maybe a single addition in that option, it helps to facilitate bringing departments closer together.
So two observations from the meeting that we had over at the middle school. One was how important the renovations were going to be for our STEM program. Science, technology, engineering, math programs. That was a major leap forward in terms of where we are currently. And the second is the library, the media center, whatever we call that. That was going to be transformational as well. And any of these three, we're going to have those significant improvements.
Yeah, it would totally.
Thanks for shedding light on that.
I did. Wow, nice. Yeah.
It was very illuminating. And when you redo the library media center, it also provides better and new access for the student support services too, which
Exactly.
currently happen on the second floor of the library.
The other, just the last comment I'll make is that the difference between those is not as huge as you would expect. So to stay within the walls currently, the difference between the cost of doing that and the cost of actually building one or two additions.
Well, there's certainly overlap between the ranges.
A lot of overlap.
There's
Like
a lot of overlap.
even at the skinny down version within the four walls, several walls, is the skinniest version is 3.7, I think you said.
Yeah.
It struck me that there's more overlap than there is other.
Yeah.
There's a lot of overlap, and when you look at what it would take to not only do some renovation to parts of the building, but to also really do renovation, like some light and bright stuff to the whole building, they get to be very close.
Yeah.
You know, things like where we've got, wood doors with veneer peeling off, that one always comes to mind, because it's the kind of thing that, yeah, you can live with it for a little while. But over time, if you continue to live with doors that have veneer peeling off them and drinking fountains that don't quite work and brickwork that's been kind of redone and patched and stuff, it just, it's like your house. It starts to look kind of run down and doesn't really serve your purpose. So if we're looking at kind of updating all of the classrooms, the prices start to get,
even more
it gets
close.
more closer.
I think you will be impressed at the progress that has been made from where we were before. Yeah.
I'm
A lot of work.
And all three drawings are cool. I mean, they're all viable.
Yeah.
And so it's going to be a neat presentation.
Excellent. Thanks.
Anybody else?
Well, and this is no surprise to any of us, but every time we hear a cost, it goes up a little bit.
Always.
And, it's not gonna go down, so we gotta be really careful.
Yes. That's why we need to know about all this bonding stuff. That's important to know
Just so you
where
know
we
your
can go with
options.
it. Yeah.
So I've heard 3 versions at one point and then 2 versions. What will we have, 3 or 2?
It'll be 2 to 3.
The steering committee is deciding, but I heard arguments for 3 at our
We
last
have
meeting.
3 right now.
But 3 that are in transition. They're being refined for our Thursday meeting.
The committee would like to get it to 2, but we also acknowledge that we may not be able to do that.
I don't think there was consensus on the committee to get it to 2. There originally was talk about that there were some good reasons to keep it at 3. You guys remember any of that conversation? Yeah.
They're nodding, that means 2 to 3.
I remember it in June,
Yeah.
pros of state.
Yeah.
So you very well may get 3.
Okay.
We have at least 1 meeting, if not 2, prior to the next board meeting, so.
All good?
Yes.
Moving
thanks.
on.
The other items
9B.
will be relatively quick, so.
9B, budget parameters. Jay's going to begin the discussion of budget parameters and review the budget planning calendar.
If you want to give us a brief overview on kind of how you're planning on.
Okay, well, the budget calendar, do they have that in the packet? That outlines just basic budget cycle in the spring. Now that we have a resolution with our teacher's contract, we know, and our benefits, we know 75 to 80% of our budget for next year. And so now it's a matter of just filling in the balance. So I'm working with the administrators to nail down basically supplies and services, looking at professional development and curriculum and things like that, and getting estimates from people, what stipends we'll be filling in, and the tentative budget by law needs to be approved in August, and then the final budget in September. My ultimate goal is to have a tentative budget being approved before the fiscal year begins. That I don't know if we'll be able to achieve that this year, but certainly next year and ongoing, I'd like to have a tentative budget approved before we start spending in the next fiscal year.
It may be, and we talked about that last year, it may be that this year we have to stick with what we've always done and approve that tentative budget in August. But our end goal with Jay in, as he's working through and redoing some items, is to get that tentative budget done before you go for your summer vacations.
And now that we have the 5-year model, we just continually update it when we get new information, when we get the CPI information and the property information in the fall, when we get the other information in the spring. So it's kind of at any given point, we should have a 5-year rolling forecast, and then filling out or fine-tuning the final budget for the following years just should be an exercise, easy exercise. But my assumptions for the budget are basically going to be, what you have in front of you in the long-term projection. Just in that first year, I did in the projection have all supplies and services going up 2%. My goal would be to hold those flat for next year, and so that we will benefit from some big retirements next year and some reductions in staff and a big reduction in our premium. So I think next year we can attempt to have a surplus and kind of to take that money and use it for the renovations in order to enhance our fund balance for the future, because we have some positive things happening next year, and then in the following years we're going to have some challenges. So I don't think it'd be wise to spend all that money next year and then not have it for the future. So we're looking at a surplus budget next year.
So more to come. There'll be more to come on this both at the end of the month and at the June board meeting.
Anybody have any other follow-up questions to that, Jay? All right, now we'll go back down to 90 early release days. Dr. Sophie's going to update the board on early release dates added to the calendar, and the board will be asked to approve the revised 2015-2016 calendar at the next meeting.
I want to remind everybody that when we approved the 15-16 calendar, there was a note on it saying that early release days would be added after negotiations were over. So you voted and approved the teacher contract at the last meeting. We've done a lot of talking as administrators. We talked with our professional development teachers. And what you see in front of you and what I'm recommending is to keep generally the same schedule we've had in the past, which is the first and last days of school is early release days, which is early release is only about an hour. And I think I added 2 more within the year, so that generally the second Monday of every month we have an early release day. One of the issues that I hear repeatedly, and I totally understand as a parent, is parents really want consistency. And so it's hard to balance that with all the time that's needed. And so what I'm recommending per our memo, and as I've discussed with some of you already, is that we really research next year. We work with our new professional development team. We talk to parents, possibly even survey parents. I'll work with Ron Salsky to see about potential child care on early release days. And we really put together everything possible to make a very good and thoughtful decision on what we're going to do in the future with early release days. The only other thing, as I was thinking about this, is we need to continue getting parents to subscribe to our Google District Calendar, because those early release days are on there, as well as Kevin has them all set up in School Messenger. We send reminders out all the time on early release days. So my recommendation will be to approve the 15-16 calendar at the next board meeting.
Do you want to say what people have to do to get on that Google Calendar?
The directions are actually right on the website, right underneath the calendar itself. There are directions on how to sync it with your regular calendars.
And it's important to note that if you've already subscribed, you don't have to do anything different. All the new dates are going to be populating very soon. Because we have them, we just have to get them entered in the calendar now at this point. So that concludes my early release date report.
So for the most part, status quo, study it, figure it out, do it right next year.
Right.
Okay. Anybody else? Questions? All right. 9F, enrollment update. Dr. Rubenstein will share with the board the current information on enrollment.
When we met in January, we discussed enrollment estimates for the 2015-2016 school year. Those enrollment estimates were based on the 6-day enrollment figures for this year. And so Dr. Sophie asked me to give the board just a very brief update on where we're at based on our current enrollment. So where we could expect kids in based on class numbers today in classes for the next year. In the end, it does not make a huge amount of difference. I will say that over the course of the last several months since January, we have received a number of new students, and that's not typical for a district our size during the course of the school year. We had several people join us after spring break, which again is not typical. Typically, people are going to move. They're going to move either early on in the school year or over the summer, and so that was a little bit of a surprise to us. But it ends up not making a huge amount of difference in the enrollment numbers overall. The only thing that is not included in this is that we opened our enrollment, our registration for the 15-16 school year on May 4th, and we've had, I want to say 16 new students in various grade levels pre-register with us. They haven't all proven residency, they haven't all done all of the paperwork, but 16 students who have notified us that they plan to enroll in our district in the fall. And that is, typically by this point, we don't see a number that high. Last year at this time, I went back and checked in our spreadsheet. We had we had 3 or 4 that had already notified us, and so it is quite the increase. We're keeping our eyes on enrollment, especially in certain classes, like 3rd grade for next year. Always hoping for a few more 3rd graders, and then. And just really closely monitoring them. One of the other things that Dr. Sophie and I talked about doing is making sure that we understand better why people are enrolling in our district. What are the key factors that they use to decide in those in enrolling in our district? Is it because of our class sizes? Is it because of our outstanding academic reputation? That sort of thing. When Hoods moved to the area several years ago, they had lots of choices in the area where they could enroll their children, and so we want to sort of know and better understand what's allowing people to really be attracted to our schools.
That's a good idea.
I had a question about kindergarten enrollment. So it looks to me like for full day,
Yes.
our classes are about full, and I don't remember how many students we pick up typically over a summer for kindergarten. I'm assuming a few?
Correct. At this point, we are pretty full for the full day kindergarten. We have tended to pick up around between 7 and the high, I think, I went back and looked, was 14. It was a really unusual year. And so for right now, what we plan to do with all of those students who enroll over the summer and want full day is to take their names, let them know that they would be put in the half day section. And if in August, as we continually monitor, we find that there are enough students to open a full day section, then we can do that. And again,
And then we'll have to find a classroom.
Exactly. So there are a number of things because so
So
first
right
grade.
now, everybody who's in half day wanted to be there.
Right now, everybody who's in half day wanted to be there. Correct.
Okay. So then it seems unlikely we would pick up enough additional students that you'd have to.
I don't
hire
think
another-
we will, but we just
Never know.
continue to monitor also.
Okay.
That is exactly it. I think that I was figuring we would have to pick up somewhere between 12 and 15 in order to have
justify
enough
another classroom.
for another classroom, right?
Okay.
Okay, any questions on enrollment? Jean has pointed out to me, Dr. Sophie's pointed out to me that in the interest of time, we do not need to cover the next two discussion items 9G and 9H.
We will carry them.
Unless somebody else has a problem with that and really wants to drill into that, we'll table that until the next meeting and move to action item agenda 10A, the purchase of a maintenance truck. And I'm going to leave that to Dr. Sophie and Jay to enlighten us on that.
I actually think that the memo, it was very detailed. So when you read through, it really talks about our fleet. It talks about the age of the vehicle that we're replacing, which was 2003. It talks about the need to be able to pull different items. And so we're recommending that we purchase this 2015 Ford. And then I want to see if there's any questions on it. The memo's pretty detailed.
This is something we had budgeted for
Yes,
in the current budget.
yes.
If we approve purchase, will you then move snow removal in-house then with that decision?
I think that's the long range.
That's the long range plan. We have a few more pieces of equipment to buy next year. We may have one more year of outsourced snow removal, but if not next year, the following year it will be in-house entirely.
Sidebar, if we do, we need to protect our plows. We had several stolen a couple of years ago, more than a couple of years ago. But
Yeah, that happened.
right before you came, I think they were from the side of the LBES. We had no cameras over there.
Well, that's part of the storage, building something to store our equipment is part of the renovation.
Reference
That's probably what
conversation
led to
about what we
outsourcing.
spend on renovation.
Fistful of applause.
Yeah.
Oh, did you hear that? Our new board member suggested we store everything in his house.
Excellent.
Hey, as long as you start with my driveway.
Okay. Any further discussion or questions about the maintenance truck? Okay, may I have a motion to approve the purchase of a 2015 Ford F-350 4x4 crew cab to replace the existing 2003 Chevy K2500 HS Silverado 4x4 crew cab in the amount of $36,378.
This should probably be a guy thing, so moved.
Second.
Okay, roll call vote, please.
It's a truck.
Okay, Julie Gottschall.
Yes.
Richard Hay.
Yes.
Phil Hood.
Yes.
John Marsden.
Yes.
Susan Ryder.
Yes.
Mark Berry.
Yes.
Leanne Sherlow, yes.
All right, the motion is approved. You have a new truck. 10B, personnel report. Let's see. In this upcoming personnel report, as you have in your board packet, we're talking about a leave of absence without pay for Amy Estvonder, who's a first grade teacher at the elementary school for the 2015-16 school year, per board policy 5:20. We're also talking about the rehire of Brandy Capaccio, an ELL teacher at the elementary school at 1.0 FTE for the 2015-16 school year. There's no change in overall FTE as we are taking 0.2 from speech and language vacancy to meet the needs of the ELL program. Any questions or comments or concerns about the personnel report, personnel motion? Okay, may I have a motion to approve the personnel report for March 12, 2015 as presented by the administration, and as I've just described?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Richard Hay.
Yes.
John Marsden.
Yes.
Susan Ryder.
Yes.
Mark Berry.
Yes.
Leanne Sherlow, yes. Julie Gottschall.
Yes.
Motion is approved. All right.
Oh, excuse me.
Yes.
Your name isn't on my cheat sheet. I'm sorry.
Thank you. It is approved.
Already forgot.
That didn't last long.
But I will learn to pronounce your name correctly.
I don't feel bad. I've been skipped over as president several times, so just have.
Yeah, but it bothers him.
Item 11, public comments. If anybody would like to address the board, please do so, but there doesn't appear to be anybody here. So may I have a motion to adjourn at 9:22 p.m.?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We're adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Don't forget curriculum is on the table if you want to take a quick glance on it.
Study.